Assalamu alaikum, dear learners. Welcome back to class. Today I want us to discuss on the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. The last lesson we were discussing on the Battle of Uhud. Having known that, we have discussed two battles so far. That is the Battle of Badr and the Battle of Uhud. And the last lesson we discussed about the Battle of Uhud, the events that happened during the Battle of Uhud, and the results of the Battle of Uhud. Just to remember what we discussed, my dear learners, on the results of Battle of Uhud, what happened? I just want you to elaborate or to give me only 2 points of what happened during the events of the Battle of Uhud. Yes, dear learners? Yes, we can say at the end of the Battle of Uhud, this time round, the Quraysh won. The first battle, the Battle of Badr, the Muslims won. But during the second time, the Battle of Uhud, the Quraysh won. And what was the main reason for them winning? Why did they win this time round? Yes, the Quraysh won the battle because the Muslims disobeyed the Prophet. And which character did they show that proved that they disobeyed the Prophet? Yes, they disobeyed the Prophet by not going according to what he ordered. The Prophet ordered the 50 archers not to live on top of Mount Uhud under any circumstance. But we found that the archers that were placed there at the beginning of the war, when they saw that now they were winning, and the Quraysh were running away, leaving their equipment and weapon behind, the 50 archers that were on top of Mount Uhud came down to collect the weapons and items the Quraysh people left behind. And that one made the Quraysh that were still around to reorganize themselves, climbed on top of Mount Uhud very fast, killed the remaining Muslim archers that were there, and they were now capable of surrounding the whole area. Hence, the Muslims were totally injured and defeated. And as a result, how many Muslims were killed during the Battle of Uhud? Yes, 70 Muslims were killed during the Battle of Uhud. That one includes Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet. What of Quraysh? How many died during the Battle of Uhud? How many Quraysh died? Yes, 22 Quraysh members died during the Battle of Badr. Hence, the Quraysh members ended up winning the battle. So, my dear learners, that was just a brief review of what we did in our previous lesson. Now, I want us to discuss on the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. What is the meaning of the word treaty? Treaty means an agreement. This one is an agreement made through negotiation by people to stay safely. So we can say an agreement made through negotiation by people to stay peacefully. An agreement made by people to stay peacefully. Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. And Hudaibbiyah, this one is now an area or a town in Makkah. A town in Makkah. Now, my dear learners, when we talk of Treaty of Hudaibbiyah, treaty is an agreement. Hudaibbiyah is in Makkah. I want us to understand, meaning there's an agreement that was made in Makkah. Treaty agreement, Hudaibbiyah is a place. So this is an agreement that was made in Hudaibbiyah. Now, I want us to know that we are still continuing with the fight of Muslims and the Quraysh. Now, for the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah, this one states very clearly that it was an agreement that the Muslims were to make with the Quraysh. And why were they to make an agreement? So I want you to listen to me carefully, then we shall continue with our discussion Listen to me carefully on what I'm going to read. In the 6th year of Hijrah, it was in the 6th year of Hijrah, Prophet Muhammad left with 1,400 Muslims. So the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah, it took place in the 6th year after Hijrah. The Prophet left Medina to Mecca with 1,400 Muslims to go to Mecca to perform Umrah. Are you getting me? So it was in the 6th year after Hijrah. How many members did the Prophet left with? 1,400 Muslims. 1,400 Muslims, they were going to perform Umrah in Mecca. They did not carry any weapon because they did not intend to fight anyone. The Prophet left Ibn Maktoum to be in charge of Medina by the time they were going for Umrah in Mecca. The Prophet and the Muslim reached at a place called Hudaibbiyah. Hudaibbiyah is a place near Mecca, a town near Mecca, and they camped there. The Meccans were informed of the intention or the coming of the Muslims to Mecca. They decided they would not allow Muslims to enter Mecca that year, whatever or under any circumstance. They denied Muslims the entry into Mecca. And remember, the Muslims were only coming to perform Umrah. They did not come to fight anybody, or they never had any intention of fighting. So, we are being told that Prophet Muhammad sent Uthman bin Affan to go and negotiate with the Meccans that they have not come to fight, but they just want to perform Umrah and they go back. So, Prophet Muhammad sent Uthman bin Affan to negotiate with the Meccans and inform them about their intention of performing Umrah, but not to fight. The Meccans decided to detain Uthman for 3 days. So Uthman was detained for how many days? Uthman detained for 3 days. They detained Uthman for 3 days, but later released him. So they decided to approach the Muslims where they were camping at Hudaibbiyah. We are being told that the Meccans finally agreed to meet the Muslims and they negotiate with them. They talked with them, and that is where they negotiate with the people to stay peacefully. So they finally accepted to go and meet the Muslims and negotiate with them. They sent Suhail bin Amru. So remember, Uthman was sent by the Muslim, but now Suhail bin Amru is being sent by the Quraysh to go and listen to the negotiation the Muslims wanted to make. So they sent Suhail bin Amru to represent them. After some negotiation, they enter into a peaceful agreement which is known as the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. That agreement that they negotiated about is what was called the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. Now, my dear learners, I want us to check on the terms of the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. Which agreements did they put across? Which agreement did they put across? The very first agreement, under their talk, they negotiate. The Muslims wanted to stay peacefully in Mecca. So this is what they agreed upon. The very first agreement, the Muslims were to return to Medina without performing Mecca that year. So that was the first agreement. The Meccans denied the Muslims entry to enter Mecca for Umrah, but the Muslims were to go back and come back the following year for Umrah. So meaning that year they did not have to perform Umrah, and they agreed. So Prophet Muhammad agreed. That was the very first agreement. The second agreement, the Muslims will return to Mecca the following year to perform Umrah, meaning that year they were not allowed to perform Umrah. The third agreement is if any Muslim went to Medina, he must be returned to Mecca. That was one of the conditions that was put down. Any Muslims that was to join or to go to Medina was to be returned to Mecca. However, if any Muslims from Medina went to Mecca, he was not to be returned, but he was to be left and stay there. Meaning the Quraysh were saying this: if any Muslims decided to join the Quraysh side, that Muslims was allowed to stay with the Quraysh side. But if any case a Quraysh was to leave the Quraysh group and join the Muslim side, this Quraysh member was to be returned back. So that point was a bit tricky. It was not favorable, but it was just considering one side. Let us see. The Prophet agreed also with the third condition. And the fourth agreement was any tribe. Remember, in Quraysh we had the Banu Huza and Banu Bakr. These ones were among the tribes in the Quraysh. Any tribe is free to join or enter the treaty in either side. Meaning, if any case they wanted to be on the Muslim side, it was well and good. They wanted to join the Quraysh side, it was also well and good, and they were allowed. So we have been told that any tribe is free to join a treaty with either Prophet Muhammad or the Quraysh of Makkans. And the fifth term was each party would remain neutral, meaning there was to be no favorism or helping any other party. Each party would remain neutral in the event of war between other party and a third party. That one means if any case there was war between these other tribes, then neither the Muslim nor the Quraysh was to give support to any other tribe, but they were to left to fight on their own. So Muslims or Quraysh were not to support other tribes fighting or enter into war to support them, but they were to left to fight their own battle alone without the help of Muslims, without the help of the Quraysh. That was the fifth term. And the last term, or the last point, was there should be peace with no war between the Muslims and the Quraysh for 10 good years. There was to be peace between the Muslims and the Quraysh for 10 good years, meaning for the next 10 good years, the Muslims and the Quraysh were not to fight. The Muslims were to come to perform Umrah peacefully and leave. The Muslim was not allowed, if any case the Muslim joined the Quraysh side, then that Muslim was to be welcomed. But if any case the Quraysh joined the Muslim side, then that Quraysh was to be taken back to his tribe. So, my dear learners, those are some of the points of the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah that I wanted to discuss with you. I want us now to note them down. So, the treaty was meant to resolve, we can say, the treaty was meant to resolve conflict between the Muslims and the Quraysh. That was the main reason for the treaty between the Muslims and the Quraysh. It took place, which year did the treaty took place, my dear learners? Yes, the treaty took place in the 6th year after Hijrah. It took place in the 6th year after Hijrah. So the word after Hijrah is always abbreviated as AH. The Quraysh and the Muslims agreed to sign the treaty that was to last for 10 years. So the Quraysh and the Muslims agreed to sign the treaty and it was to last for 10 years. So sign the treaty which was to last for 10 years. My dear learners, hence the treaty was called the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. That one is why we called it the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah, because that agreement took place at a place called Hudaibbiyah. So, my dear learners, I want you to write down the following questions. The very first question, my dear learners, which year was the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah signed? Which year was the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah signed? The second question, who represented the Quraysh during the process of drafting the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah? Who represented the Quraysh during the process of drafting the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah? Those two questions, my dear learners, I want you to listen back to the story that I've read, that we have discussed. You are going to get your answers. The only two questions, go back, listen carefully to what is the story, and then answer for me those questions. The third and the last one, discuss and write down the terms of the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah. Discuss or just write for me the terms of the Treaty of Hudaibbiyah that I had discussed with you. Bye-bye, learners.